in my 56th year. How many people here are older than me? Okay, so I'm kind of in the middle still. That's good. So
we are all old. That's the problem.
I'm talking about age-appropriate transhumanism. Now, by that, I'm not talking about using
there's
something else is still on, I think.
These mics might be on.
Let's stand over here, something better. I'm not talking about being careful with your language. I'm talking about transhumanism. So it's not, you can have fucking transhumanism if people are older and not people are younger. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm actually talking about applied or practical transhumanism and how the application of these ideas to your personal life should vary depending on your age and a number of other factors. So that's really what I'm going to touch on. There's an awful lot of stuff I could cover. How do we advance the page down? Oh, this one. Okay, thanks. So yes, how much and how hard at your age? And get your minds out of the gutter. I'm not talking about that. So there's a lot of space here, even with our current lifespans, for differences in how you behave. Now, I kind of just wanted to have a quick tag for this. Raging aging made me think of by doing anything that's unproven and risky, and they got lots of time to wait for these things to get better. So really, it's not a good idea to be an early adopter if you're young. Now, if you're getting older and we're still seeing really not much going on in life extension. I mean, things are starting to move a little bit more. But 30 years ago, if you asked me where would we be in 2019, I would have been fairly confident we'd be much further along in understanding and controlling the aging process. But I'm not even sure if that's going to be solved in the next 30 years. And I don't know how long I'm going to live. So I think it's becoming more and more reasonable for me to take bigger risks, to do things that might actually make a major difference in my remaining lifespan and give me more chance to catch up and be around for longevity escape velocity, which I'll come back to in a minute. So yeah, basically, rage more as you get older, chill out when you're younger, kind of goes against the grain. But there are real risks to taking actions, whether it's taking smart drugs, life extension treatments, even basic old supplements. We find out some of those things can actually be counterproductive. So what kinds of risks am I talking about? Not just risks to health and function, but those are certainly important. I mean, I know I was in California not long ago, and there was this guy who's fairly young, and he's taking large infusions of NAD+, which is certainly an interesting treatment. I'm very intrigued by it. I'm still learning about that. But it seemed to me like he was taking some risks. This is not really well tested. He's still pretty young, and it's not clear that he's going to get enough benefit to be worth it. Now, only he can make that decision, of course. But if you're older and your functions are really rapidly failing, then it makes more sense to take a bit more of a chance. But it's not just your health and longevity. You can waste your money. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's always someone willing to sell you a treatment that will enhance your intelligence or make you live longer, but they cost money. I did a clinical trial, which if I had to pay for it would have cost me $30,000. This was the TRIM trial. I can't remember what it stands for. It's basically the goal was to regenerate the thymus gland using human growth hormone and then some other compounds to mitigate the increase in insulin. That's one of the I's. And so that would have been a lot of money, and if I was in my 20s, that wouldn't make any sense, because your thymus is still in good shape at 20. If you don't know this, by the way, it's pretty scary stuff. The thymus, which produces your T cells, which are critical to your immune system, that thymus just falls apart over time. So by the time you're 60, it's basically a useless lump of fat sitting there doing nothing. And the idea is to use growth hormone to actually regenerate the cortex part of it, so it produces fresh T cells. And it seems to work. I'm still waiting for the final results. But there are some possible risks to that. It can raise your insulin levels. It has to be carefully monitored. Mine was super low to begin with, so it wasn't really a problem. But there are often side effects of these things. So money is a big one, and I'll come back to that from the other point of view, the reward point of view in a moment. There's also a reputation risk. If people see you doing things that they may think are stupid and highly risky when you're really not going to benefit from them, you may not have such a great reputation. So yeah, it's an expense, is a risky reputation, but also doing nothing also has a cost, obviously. But again, the older you get, the risk-reward balance tends to tip in your favor of doing sensible things, and I'll talk more about those things. So what kind of choices, how do you make these choices? How do you decide whether this is a good bet for you or not? Well, first of all, we have to look at certain assumptions. I'm going to talk about what younger transhumanists can do, what older transhumanists can do. But the assumptions you have to kind of look at and research each of these treatments or modalities or implants or whatever we're talking about. You have to also ask, how risky is it? And how much information do we have on the risk? How many people have tried this before? If it's like 3, then you really have no idea what's going to happen. If it's 10,000 or 50,000, then you'll be a little bit more confident. How likely is it to actually benefit you? So even if it doesn't seem terribly risky, it probably costs something. How much is the benefit? Is it really marginal, or is it something major? So for me, for instance, getting an implant that lets me sense electromagnetic fields, as some people have done, I don't really see I get much benefit from that. Like, okay, I can sense electromagnetic fields. What is it actually really good for? What is the risk that I'll get an infection from the surgery or cause some other problems or damage a nerve or something? So to me, that one's not really worth it. Your mileage may vary. So another question is, the answers to these questions will often depend on your views about progress. Now we've already seen, as of this morning, Callum has a view that it's going to be more like the end of the century before really exciting stuff happens. And other people, Ben, it's going to happen tomorrow. Well, slight exaggeration. And I'm somewhere in the middle there. I don't really know. I think it's pretty hard to predict that stuff. But your views about that are very important, obviously, in deciding what risks are worth taking. Because if you believe longevity escape velocity is 10 years away, then there's no point taking some huge risks on experimental stuff right now. And by longevity escape velocity, does everybody know what that means? It's basically the idea that, for several decades, until the last couple of years at least, we were gaining about 3 months of lifespan per year. So we're living longer and longer, but it's kind of slowed down now because people are getting diabetic and overweight and so on. But the idea is that we'll gradually make progress, so we'll start gaining 6 months per year, 9 months per year. Once we hit 1 year per year, we basically bought ourselves a lot more time, and then we start to actually reverse aging. So that's longevity escape velocity. I'm not sure who coined that. I don't know who uses it the most. I'm not sure if he coined it or not. So when will that happen? If it's going to be another 50 years, and you're getting old, then you should probably think about doing some pretty major stuff. Maybe you should get your thymus regenerated, for instance. Yeah, it's going to cost you maybe $25,000, $30,000 because you have to get the growth hormone, you have to get all these scans done at Stanford Medical School, there's a whole bunch of stuff involved. And you have to inject yourself 4 times a day for a year, and that's kind of a pain in the butt. But it might be worth it. Maybe NAD plus infusions might be worth it then. So it really depends on how fast you think things are going to happen. And of course, that's a very complicated question because that interacts with a whole discussion about AI and how much will AI drive improvements in medicine. And I know a lot of people here are very confident, yeah, that's going to happen really soon, and AI is going to really make medical innovation take off. And I go, okay. Just like in the late 90s, we heard about the genomics revolution and how that produced all these fantastic new drugs. Well, where the hell are these new drugs? Instead, what we're seeing is a decline in new drug approvals. Maybe that's just starting to improve recently. So we don't really know, so be a little bit careful with your assumptions there. So how risky, how large are the benefits? How confident are you in your views on that? How much do you know? How many people have they been tested on? When do you think these major breakthroughs will work? Now another one, David said I'm the CEO of Alcohol Life Extension Foundation, which is the world's leading cryonics organization. So of course I have to say a little bit about cryonics. It's very relevant to this because it does cost something to sign up for cryonics and fund it and so on, and it may cost you some reputational issues too. Some of your friends might think you're really weird, or your family may not like it. Believe me, I've seen some pretty strong reactions there. So you've got to figure out, well, okay, I'm getting kind of older, I'm not sure if I can reach longevity escape velocity, I really should have a backup plan. Now if you're younger, it still can make sense to do that. At least get the insurance while it's cheaper, because it's going to get more expensive as you go on. You don't have to sign up for membership, although you never know when something's going to happen. But yeah, cryonics does cost something. It's going to cost something in terms of how people see you and how sensitive are you to that. Do you care? I don't give a shit, frankly. I just tell people, yeah, I want my head frozen. Deal with it. And I don't just, it's their problem. It's not mine if they think I'm weird. They're the weird ones. They want to be buried or cremated and destroyed forever. I want to live indefinitely, and I'm the strange one? Come on. So how likely do you think cryonics is to work? That's something you actually have to really do some research into. You can't just kind of wave your hands like this idiot Michio Kaku, who some of you may know. He's a physics guy, does popular TV stuff and books, and he did a YouTube video saying how what cryonics was nonsense. The trouble is he didn't know what he was talking about. He didn't bother doing any research because he thought, I'm a physicist. I'm so smart, I don't need to research it. I know a priori that it's bullshit. Really? Okay. So anyway, got everything wrong. You can go find my YouTube, I'm not going to repeat what I said, but I have a YouTube response which has like 3 times as many views as his. So yeah, try and figure out how does it work. No, cells don't blow up and all that stuff. And how likely is it you're going to be cryopreserved under good conditions? Well, it kind of depends on a lot of factors. Where you live, whether we can respond quickly. Some countries are going to be really tough to get you out of. If you're in France, good luck. It actually depends on the legal system you're a part of. The English-American legal system is generally more protective of your rights and choices. In some countries, you can't even touch somebody after they've been declared legally dead for hours, and that's obviously a problem. What am I doing here? So another thing to think about is how much income or wealth we have at various ages. Because some of these things, I think they cost money. Maybe it's better to wait and save. That's one big message that shouldn't have to give, but for youngsters out there, save your damn money. And actually one of the points I wanted to make in reply to this whole discussion about universal basic income, if young people actually saved and invested, not try and choose anything, just put it in a broad index of stocks, when all the work is taken over by the AIs, you'll be owning a big chunk of those. And so you will generate income for yourself. That's my capitalist solution. We don't need the government to tax people to solve that problem, I think. I don't know, we can discuss that more. But regardless, save, because the power of compound interest is pretty amazing. It's exponential, right? It's an exponential process. So the earlier you start, the more money you will have, the more freedom you will have, the more choices you have, the more things you can afford to fund. So, okay, briefly, for younger transhumanists then, I'll give an example of something I put off for many years, which is, I'm very short-sighted. If I had my contacts in, I'd be really you'd just be a blur. And I never had LASIK surgery, because I keep thinking, oh, this is my eyes. If they screw that up, that's pretty bad. So why don't I wait till it gets better? And when I first heard about it, you know how they used to do it in the good old days in Russia? They basically put you on a table, got a razor blade, and sliced into your eyeball. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that. And then they figured out, how to use lasers, then they figured out pull the flap back and so on. And they're still getting better. And I'm hoping that one day there'll be, stem cells so you can inject somewhere and my corneas will generate or whatever, my lenses will be fixed. I'm doing okay with the contact lenses right now. So yeah, I figure young person, don't be a first adopter. There's really not much benefit if you're young, because your risks are pretty low, you're not going to gain that much. Let other people be the guinea pigs. Let us older, more fartier people take those risks. I'm not an old fart, I'm just older and fartier, not completely there yet. Let's see, yeah, so power of interest, get that insurance early on. Of course, there's some boring stuff, well, I'll come back to this later. For older transhumanists, I would suggest that you really do your research on life extension measures first of all, because obviously with life extension, doesn't matter whether you enhance your cognition. If you're dead, that doesn't really help you very much. So that's going to be the main focus, I think. So do think about doing something pretty radical if you're over 50, especially if you're over 60, and absolutely if you're over 70. And definitely, I would say look into Cryonics because that's a good backup option. So let's see, all the transhumanists. Yeah, invest more in things like clinical trials, like the trial I did. And if anybody wants information on that, by the way, if you have $30,000, you can actually go pay as you go. I was one of the 10 lucky people in the initial trial that was funded, so I didn't pay for it. But you can get this, but you have to pay for it yourself now. And I can give you that contact information if you think that's... But again, if you're under 50, probably not a good payoff. If you're an older person too, and well, I guess I already made this point, don't let status quo bias or what people think bother you. That's something... I've never had a problem with that. I've always been so open about my views. Yeah, I want to go into space, I want to live indefinitely, I want to freeze my brain if necessary, I want to plug computers into my brain. And if people have a problem with it, that's too bad. Not everybody is that, I don't know what the right word for that is, resilient or uncaring about other people's foolish opinions. So you have to work on that, and if you're always shy about that, just try practicing a little more often, say something a bit more controversial to someone you know a little bit less, and you kind of build up your strength for that. Now there are some things that are, I can't see my slides here, so I've already kind of gone through this. Not really missing anything with the slides, they're very basic. So there are some things which are good habits and safe bets at pretty much any age. Now of course, unfortunately, a lot of those are rather boring and difficult, like saving money, exercising, dieting, having a proper diet. Those things are really boring, but they're also still pretty crucial and powerful. One interesting twist on the diet side, though, is if we're to believe Michael Rose, gerontologist at University of California, you really shouldn't worry too much about what you eat when you're young. But he argues that once you reach about 40, you should really go paleo. And I'm not sure exactly how that works, but basically saying your gene expression changes after, I guess, reproductive age. And before that, you won't really get so much benefit from going paleo. Afterwards, you get a lot of benefit from going paleo. So it's kind of an interesting view, if that's correct. No, I'm not saying it is necessarily. But that is a very definite shift in diet. Obviously, other kind of difficult, boring stuff, learning how to think critically. And I believe that Natasha will be talking a bit more about that. Learning to think critically, reading all the stuff you can that's relevant to this, and reading it critically, and tracking these technologies. Don't just wait till it's delivered and handed to you, because again, sometimes you may want to adopt things earlier than others, and if you haven't been following it, you won't really know, does this work? And again, I don't want to tread on what Natasha's going to say, so I won't say more than that. Also, from the start, if you build good habits, I'm a fan of Aristotle and his virtue ethics rather than deontology or utilitarianism, and partly because it kind of works with human psychology. The earlier you start building good habits, even if you think, well, I'm not really going to benefit from these for a long time, well, it's easier to do that stuff when you're younger because your brain's still more plastic until we can fix that problem. So get the good habits in place early on, like don't stay up all night every night partying because that's just not going to do you good in the long run. I know, I'm a wet blanket. I don't follow my own advice sometimes. But that's a really powerful thing to do because those habits will get stronger and stronger over time, and then when you really need them, they'll be there. And if you suddenly try to be a good boy or a good girl when you're 40 or 50, you're going to struggle. Let's see, I think things like fasting, intermittent fasting, those are pretty good things. There's a lot of evidence, I think, for those at any age. Those are all good. And I'd say something that's kind of abstract and difficult to say how you do this, but I think more important than just about anything, it's kind of a meta trait in a way, is don't be fixed to your beliefs. I like the idea that convictions make convicts. If you're convinced of something, if someone attacks your belief on something and you take it personally and you feel like you have to defend it, you're doing it wrong because it doesn't matter if you're mistaken about something. And the problem is our language. We say you're wrong. We don't say this idea is mistaken. We say you're wrong. Oh, I'm wrong. It suddenly feels like a personal attack, and so that's not good. You've got to learn to take yourself away from your particular views. Only that way will you actually be able to change your mind for the better, and that's how you're going to survive and improve yourself in the long term. So finally, obviously, I could kind of turn this into a book. Hey, that's a good idea. So I'm just touching on a lot of stuff very briefly. I would say finally, in terms of trying to do the good thinking, the critical thinking, adjusting risks and rewards, checking assumptions, I would suggest using something like the proactionary principle, which is my sort of alternative to the precautionary principle, which also Steve has written quite a lot about. And that's really kind of a complex set of principles, but most importantly in this area, I'd say apportion risks to benefits. So if you're going to take a risk, try to get clear about how much of a risk it is and how much you're going to get out of it. And be an economist, think on the margin. Don't just think about yes or no, think about incremental steps and how much you're going to get from each little change. Also, ask yourself, okay, how do I know whether this is going to work, if it's going to be effective? Where am I getting my information from? The people I'm getting it from, where are they getting their information from? Who's funding them? That doesn't, just because you're being funded for something doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but you have to be a little bit careful. So there's a lot of, if you look at the proactionary principle, you'll see there's kind of a number of sub-principles, including the idea of revisit and revise your views every so often. That's something we're not good at. But that's something I think as transhumanists we have to be good at, especially if we're going to be around for millennia. We have to get good at that. So look for the best decision-making techniques and try to stick to those rather than emotion and appeals to social proof. We think we're radical wild thinkers here and we don't have those problems, but we all do. We're human beings. We may be better at it than a lot of other people, a lot of other groups, but that's something we have to constantly fight against. So as you get older, aim to take more risks. If you're younger, don't take so many, so get more wild and crazy as you get older. That's kind of my takeaway point, basically. Thank you.